Hi, I'm Kim Holen, president of Gemini Agency, and today at Inside the Funnel, we have Miss Krissy Hackworthy with us.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I want to start this off so everyone can get a good background of what you do here at Gemini and maybe a little background in digital marketing.
Yeah.
Where you've been and what brought you here today.
Good question. So I'm a senior client success manager here at Gemini. I coordinate between our SEO teams, paid media teams, creative teams to make sure that I really am the voice of the client inside our four walls. And so I'm interfacing with the client every day, but also helping them answer questions that they might not realize they have as it pertains to their programs. How does SEO feed into paid search? And how do all the programs kind of marry together to create something that is sustainable and also effective for their business? By way of, I guess, my career, I've been in digital marketing for about 7 years. Started in new construction, then moved to the agency, and I love it.
So today we're talking about measurement. And when you think of marketing, you have to think of measurement.
Definitely.
Because it's all about what is going in and what is coming out.
Yeah.
And if we don't measure the right things, it can be an epic waste of time and resources and hurt a lot of businesses.
For sure.
When we get a new customer, we oftentimes find that there's a lot of tracking issues.
Yes.
And tracking interferes with measurement. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience of when you've seen that and have kind of those fiascos when it comes to tracking?
It happens more often than you would think. Tracking is definitely the most important piece of your marketing toolkit. Frequently, we have seen clients come to us and we will ask them, how is your program performing and all of this? And they will tell us one thing, but then when we actually look behind, the curtain, we're realizing that it's not what it's cracked up to be. And oftentimes we will find clients maybe have been double counting their conversions. So their baseline is actually flawed or imperfect. Typically when that happens, we really have to kind of start over from scratch. Sometimes that means creating a new ad account, which is not ideal, but frequently when clients will come to us with existing ad accounts, we don't always know where they've been or maybe the way things are set up. And so sometimes the easiest way to kind of establish that new baseline is to start with a clean slate. As Google learns what kind of audience we're targeting and things like that, it's taking in all these intent signals. And after a long period of time goes by where maybe the incorrect signals are being fed to Google, it's sometimes easier to just start back from the beginning. We can generate phone calls and we can marry in customer data with, your Google Insights and even look at revenue and the direct impact your ads have on your revenue. It still requires quite of a lift from the client in terms of their sales. And so while we can continue to bring leads to their front door, part of what my job is to also encourage and educate the client on how is their sales enablement process working once we bring them those leads. We can put salt on their tongue to get them interested and asking some of those questions about, how can I increase my follow-up? And what is the effectiveness of the certain sales strategies that I have in place? And also, how can I change that to be more efficient and more effective with their customers?
When you talk about measuring the right thing, does it differ between a home service business and a B2B customer?
Yeah.
And how are they different?
What I would say is a lot of times that comes down to cycle times, sales cycle times. With B2B, we have sales cycle times around 18 months, whereas on home service, it's much more quick wins. I've had one client, even today, he reached out and he said, I'm booked out at least 6 weeks, you need to pause. And so with that strategy, we really need to make sure that we're pacing our budgets accordingly so that they can still service the client when the need is there. On home service, if your toilet is broken, you need a plumber within like a week. I would say maybe even 3 days. But with B2B, the need is there, but they're going to take a lot longer of a time to understand all their different options and vet different vendors and make sure that, the solution that they're coming up with is right for them. A lot of our B2B clients do very custom solutions for their clients. And so while we can continue to generate leads for them and bring in those bottom of funnel leads, what further needs to happen is the salesperson needs to understand what are those specific needs for their use case, whereas we're just kind of casting a little bit of a wider net to speak more to the industry vertical or service type. And so by way of tracking that and reporting on that, with home services, we want to understand how quick are they able to get those leads, but also how quick are they able to service them. On B2B, it's a much slower and longer burn, making sure that the leads that we drive for them are very high intent, but also high value. That might mean a lower conversion rate in the short term, knowing that once they get to their sales team, that conversion, when it does take place, is going to be of a much higher value than maybe these quick hit wins.
So on home services, more leads does not mean better results.
Right.
Better leads where qualified leads lead to better results.
For sure.
Talk to me how we measure that.
When we think about lead quality, a lot of that information really comes from having conversations with our clients. We can sit here and look at numbers all day, every day, but unless we're having those conversations with our clients to understand what kind of conversations they're having with their potential leads and also their recurring customers, I think that's really where the magic starts to come into play when we're able to say, okay, this lead, they might have needed a toilet, but then once they got to their home, they realized that they have all lead pipes, and that initially could have been a $200 sale turned into a $20,000 sale refitting all of their plumbing in the home. And so I think while we can look at reporting all day and make assumptions of maybe what is happening, it's not until you start to have those conversations with the client themselves to understand what are all of the appointments they're driving looking like, and what are the value of those appointments too. One thing that we do here at Gemini is offline conversions, where we're able to marry up actual sales data with Google algorithms and create lookalike audiences where we're able to feed back to Google exactly what kind of leads these clients are going after. We can also tailor it to make sure that the leads we're feeding Google are all of those higher value leads.
So marketing is more than just being analytical. There is an emotional component to it because again, we are helping most times family-owned companies, right? We go to report, we see that everything looks great. Things are up, everything's trending up. But we meet with them, they say business is down.
Yeah.
How do you go about restoring that confidence and creating a strategy that looks like there is something that they can understand why things are happening the way they are?
When we think about reporting, yes, we want to look at the number of leads and the number of clicks and the number of sales. Also, what we really want to dial into is conversion rate. Conversion rate is how many sales are you driving based on how many calls are you getting. And so I think when people say business is down, that's really where we can go dive in deeper and understand how much more efficient are you converting the people who do come through. With the search landscape, the rise of zero-click searches has really impaired people's ability to convert leads. On the flip side of that, the folks that are coming to websites are highly qualified. They have done their research maybe through ChatGPT or some of those other large language models, and they know exactly who they want to work with so that when they're coming to their website, they're at the very bottom of the funnel and they're ready to convert. And so I think when we think about sales conversion and when those numbers are down, it is so important that you're able to drive conversions the moment they hit their website. So that's when UX audits get really important. That's when conversion optimization is critical, making sure forms are easy to find and they're easy to fill.
What is the biggest misconception you think is out there right now regarding AI and marketing?
I think the biggest misconception between AI and marketing is that our jobs are going away. I think that's completely the opposite. Yes, a lot of people are using AI to write content, but I think they're really missing the mark because when you think about the different types of content we can write, the only type of content that cannot be AI generated is customer testimonials. And so now more than ever, the voice of the customer is so critical and so important. So doing things like case studies where you're taking real life data and real life insights and applying them into a specific use case, that is magical. And that's something that AI could potentially generate for you, but it's not going to be effective. And if you really read between the lines of what AI writes, there's not that much depth there. It's all very surface level and there's going to be holes. And so while we can use AI as a content idea generator, we're not going to use it as a means to an end. Our job specifically in the content realm is being able to rank for those AI overviews and things, but then also once the customer gets to their website, telling the story of your unique value proposition, making sure the customer is bought into you as a company as opposed to the service you're providing, because quite frankly, there are so many companies that can provide just the service that you are providing, but it's the level of service that you're receiving and the quality of service. And I think when you talk about generating content by way of customer testimonials and actual experiences, that's really going to be kind of what moves the needle for the customer.
A lot of customers get fixated on certain metrics, and there was one that you wish they wouldn't get fixated on. What would it be and what would you replace it with?
I think my number one metric would be the number of leads. We can sit here and say we drove X amount of conversions in this timeline, and that's great. but I think you need to dive deeper and look at the conversation in terms of quarters, not pennies. I personally, and I think I speak for a lot of my clients when I say this, I would so much rather see, 4 really, really high value sales generating, $20,000, $30,000 of revenue in one sale than 100 sales that are each about $100. That's not effective. And so I think when we look at marketing actions, leads, conversions, whatever you want to call them, the better story to tell is actually the value of that conversion. Making sure that we understand whether their business is suffering because they're not bringing in revenue or whether they just want more leads. My favorite conversations to have with a client is when they call me and say, I need to pause because I want to service the customers that I have right now. Or maybe not pause, just dial things back because I want to make sure that I'm able to meet the needs of the leads that I have in my pipeline.
This video series is called Inside the Funnel.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a name that would just stay very true to itself over the years. And lo and behold, in just a few months, it's changing.
Yeah.
And when I think of the funnel, I think of specifically how search is changing because of visual and voice search. Mm-hmm. How does that play a role in changing that funnel?
There's a lot to unpack here, right? I think the biggest thing is we no longer need to look at it as just a funnel, but a funnel that rotates and spins. Kind of that flywheel methodology that we've seen poking out there. So the whole concept of, yes, we have a funnel going from big, broad, you're casting a very broad and wide net to you're limiting it to a certain pool of very high intent folks. That funnel is spinning like a tornado or a flywheel. And the whole concept with a flywheel is the faster that you're able to get that thing to turn, the more energy it's going to drive for you. The more energy that you're putting into it, especially by way of customers that are evangelizing about your business and telling their friends, word of mouth is going to be the fastest way to get that funnel to spin. If somebody needs a plumber and their friend had a great plumber, they're not going to do that research on their own to discover why I should go with one business or the other. They're going to know so-and-so had a great experience with this person. I'm going to call them up right now. And so I think the biggest thing, going back to that concept of customer testimonials being very impactful for your content, is really thinking about how can you revise your entire marketing funnel and marketing strategy to not only go from big to little in terms of a 2-dimensional funnel, but that speed and how fast is it rotating to get people to the bottom of that funnel.
So with that being said, are websites going to lose their power? How are customers supposed to have that brand loyalty if they can't go somewhere and actually feel what that company is about?
I think, if anything, websites are going to evolve to be much more of leading maybe with a chat bot or leading more with AI by way of answering the questions that the customer has, but also then layering on their unique value proposition. Speeding up that conversion with a chat bot, getting them the answers they need immediately, and then also providing a unique experience through that chatbot experience. I think that will help educate them in terms of how they interface with your business. But I don't think websites are going away anytime soon. That is the foundation of everything that Google and ChatGPT and everything is pulling from. If you don't have a web presence, you're never going to be served in the search results. We also know that there's so many things that we can do by way of informing AI overviews, and people also ask, and all these wonderful SERPs features that if we effectively write our content to not only be served in the search features, but be crawled by these large language models, once somebody comes to the website, that's really where the magic happens of that unique user experience, because they're not getting that user experience when they're interfacing with ChatGPT. So once they come to your website, while yes, we're going to have the content there that ChatGPT is pulling from, that's also where the magic of the user experience and the visuals and all of that can happen.
So for those businesses that are watching this video, and they're looking at the reporting from their agency, not quite sure what they're looking at, what advice would you give to them to reassure them that either that reporting is right on or it's time to start questioning?
The one thing I would say to that is more reporting does not equal better reporting. Yeah, I think if you're looking at your reporting from another agency and you can't understand why the results are what they are, that's a big red flag. I love to talk to my clients about the why behind the what. If I generated this many marketing actions, why did that happen? What lifted or what decreased that metric month over month? But then also I want to make sure that our clients aren't just looking at month-over-month results, because what you lose in just a 60-day overview is that trend line. Sometimes we'll have clients that just started working with us. At that point, of course, we're going to provide month-over-month data. But once we have the opportunity to provide especially year-over-year data, that's really when the magic of reporting comes into play, to understand what are my trends over time, not just a 90-day look back or a 6-week look back. We know that it takes so long just for things to ramp up and programs to start clicking. And so once we have our programs humming along, understanding what you're going to continue to do about them. And I think there's a lot of agencies out there that take sort of a set it and forget it approach, or it's a turn and burn, get in the door, get out, I've got contracts to win. Here at Gemini, we are very focused on our retainer clients, and I love that because it allows us to really nurture our client relationships and provide value every single month throughout the entire year. Understanding seasonal trends of their business, understanding the nuances of their business. If they want to shift from one service to another, we can be very agile in that. But I think it's not enough for agencies to just say, here are your numbers. They need to go deeper and say, here are your numbers and here's why those are your numbers. The other thing is really telling the full story of everything that's happening. So how are customers coming to their website? What are they doing once they get there? And then how are they converting and what are they doing as a result?
Well, thank you, Krissy, for your time and insights. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everything you do at Gemini as well.
Thank you.
If anyone out there wants to learn more from Krissy, just connect with her on her email in the description below. Take good care and do good work.